carrot, fruit, and even pumpkin. What do these items have in common? They are all cakes. Yes, even pumpkin. Welcome to Heart NSTA Trust's lecture series, The Heartbeat. I'm your host, Kevin Baxter. Today's beat is all about cakes, not about the baking process, but how to enhance appeal and taste through the use of decorations. The presenter for today's session is Chef Aston Price, and he will take you through 1. The tools used in cake decorating. 2. How to choose the most appropriate icing. 3. The proper procedure for covering a cake and apply finishing. Without further delay, let's join Chef Price as he unravels the magic of the cake decorative process.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, right now we'll be doing some cake decorating, but before we get to that, let me introduce you to some tools that every cake decorator must have at their disposal before they start decorating a cake. All right, before we get to that, before we get to the actual decorating, I'm going to introduce you to what we call an offset spatula. They come in many shapes and sizes, but this one is a very small one, and I like to work with this one because it is very versatile, it's small and it's easy to use, right? You have a larger one that we use for picking up cakes, right? So if you want to remove a cake from the turntable, we'll get to that in a bit, to your board, you'll use this, right? We have the straight edge one, both large and small, right? And it is also used for the spreading of icings, all right? And we'll get to that also. Another thing, we have combs, and you must be wondering, what am I doing with a comb? Not the one that you use in your hair, but we call these decorators' combs, right? We have the two-sided ones, and we have the triangular ones. They come with many different shapes and patterns. We have it in plastic, and we also have it in metal. Whatever preference, it's up to you, right? Also, we have something that we call a bench scraper. So sometimes you wonder, why is it that our cakes look so smooth as decorators? These tools help us to keep our cakes smooth, lines sharp and everything. So we call them bench scrapers or icing scrapers, right? These now, we call them fondant smoother. Have you ever wondered sometimes when you see a cake out there, you see a wedding cake, you wonder, how is that cake so smooth? These are what they use to remove something that we like to call air pockets, right? So you kind of use it to fit the fondant around the cake, right? Then we move on to tips, right? What we call tips is the same thing that persons call, that you put in piping bags to squeeze the icing out. We have the basic star tip, right? We have the round tips, right? We have shell, right? We have a rose nail, and we have leaves, right? As a decorator, you should have all of these utensils at your disposal. We also have something that we like to call a rose nail. Have you ever wondered sometimes, how is it that decorators make those beautiful roses to put on top of a cake? This is what they use, because it has the ability to, you turn it in your hand while you're applying the icing, and I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of that to you later on. We also here have some more tips, right? This now, see, it's a very large tip. We like to call it a basket pattern, right? And also we use it to spread on like the first coating of an icing, right? Can't decorate a cake without piping bags, right? You have disposable, and you have the ones that are long-lasting. I like to use the ones that are long-lasting and plastic, almost. Well, not really plastic, but paper, and it can be washed, all right? Rubber spatulas. Can't do cake decorating without rubber spatulas. Sometimes you'll see persons using them to do other things like mixing a batter, making omelets, but I use these to remix my icings. So after I use my mixers to prepare my icing, I use this to remove air pockets, because sometimes when you mix icings, air pockets tend to trap between the mixture. So you use it to remove air pockets. You have it in the large one, you have it in small. And if you realize that I'm going through all of the tools on the table, and I'm showing you both small and large, because whichever tools you are comfortable with, right, you use those tools. Because sometimes some persons are small in stature. So for somebody who is much, much shorter than me, for them to manipulate this tool is going to be a bit difficult. But for them to use this, it is much easier for them to use this one. And also, this is what we like to call a turntable. And when I say turntable, I mean not the one that you see the DJs playing with at the parties where you see it is the same, it has the same function, but what it does is that when you put a cake on it, it actually spins, right? So it's a base and then it goes in, right? So what it does is that it spins, right? So it gives you the ability to see right around your cake. And whenever you're decorating your cake or whenever you're applying your icing, it gives you the ability to spin or to turn, hence the term turntable, right? We also have some colorings here that we'll be using later on. Pastry brush. You might see me with a regular pastry brush or what we like to call a paintbrush or a silicone one. I started off with a regular paintbrush, and this was not using any paint before, right? You can purchase it at any hardware store. Once it wasn't using any paint or any form of toxic chemicals, you can utilize it and you're good to go, all right? And then I move on to a silicone one. These are a little bit more expensive, but they're more durable. As it says silicone, you can use it, it is able to withstand high temperature and very cold temperatures, right? Paring knife. It's a very versatile tool in the kitchen as a decorator, as a chef, right? This one is a serrated edge paring knife. The reason why I like to use a serrated edge paring knife is because it keeps the edge. It takes a while for it to become dull, right? I'm going to open this thing right here. This container now contains a lot of letters. So sometimes you wonder, how is it that persons, you see those letters on cakes? So this is what they use. If you are not versed in writing on a cake in that cursive way, you can cut out your fondant with these shapes and place them on a cake. So these are also very versatile to use in the kitchen. You have other different types that you can use to make different shapes to put on a cake. All right? So let's get into the meat of the matter. Right in front of me, before I get to this, dummies. As a decorator, you have to practice on something before you get to an actual cake. Because if so be it and somebody sees one of your products out there on social media, whichever one, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, wherever, or even on your WhatsApp, you want to ensure that they get the best product. So we practice on stuff, or I try to have persons practice on stuff on what we like to call dummies or even cake pans before they get to the actual cake, because you don't want to start putting icing on a cake and then it is not up to standard, and then you know that somebody pays for something and at the end of the day you get a bad name. So these are very good to have as a decorator, right? Today we'll be using 3 types of icing, but I'm going to start off this morning session with buttercream. What is buttercream icing? For some persons, buttercream icing to them is a bit too sweet and they don't really like the buttery taste of it, but I like to use buttercream icing sometimes depending on the traveling that the cake is going to do. It can withstand temperature up to a point because it has a emulsifying agent in it that we like to call shortening. So this is a mixture of butter, which is real butter, which is anchor butter, shortening, icing sugar, and flavorings, right? So what we do in order to make this we cream the shortening and the butter together. Then we add our flavorings and we sieve our icing sugar and we mix that together, right? So, as a decorator, you know you can or you can decorate a hot cake. What will happen if you decorate a hot cake? I'm gonna tell you. I made a mistake one time where somebody asked me to do a cake for them. I was just starting out in the business, and somebody asked me to do a cake for them. And I baked the cake. It wasn't cooled properly. Started to do my sandwich and stuff. And outside of the cake was cool, but then once I start sandwiching, there's a little bit of heat inside of it. And then I realized that the icing started to melt. Right? So what you want to do, you want to try to ensure that you bake your cakes before, like a day or 2 days before. You sandwich them and you put them down. Right? It is always best to bake your cakes like a day before and have them rest in the refrigerator. So it relaxes something that we like to call the gluten. So when you start to cut into your cakes now, the structure of the cake is more durable. The structure of the cake, it's more harder, so to speak. But your cake is soft, but it's easier to manipulate and it's easier to cut. I'm going to start off with just a basic 3-layer cake, right? This is just a regular sponge cake, right? It's a vanilla sponge. It's made with egg whites, icing sugar, a little bit of butter, flour, and you whip that up until it reaches stiff peaks. You fold in your flour, and then you bake it, right? So what I'm going to do now, and what I like to do is I like to start on top of my turntable, and I'm going to show you why. Because it's easier, because when you're decorating a cake, you want to ensure that the board that you're going to put it on, it stays clean at all times. Because you don't want to give somebody a board that is messy. You don't want to give somebody, your cakes look good, but your board is messy. So I start off on the turntable, and I'm going to show you. Okay? So we have another piping bags. Remember we talked about this not too long ago. How to fill your piping bag. You realize it has a cone shape, right? And what it does is that it helps to hold whatever icing you're about to use. All right? So you just fold it over like this. Put your hand under the cone. Right? So you fold it or you form it like a pocket. Right? And then what you do now, just kind of press it down a little. So you realize I'm working without a tip at the moment because I don't really necessarily want a pattern edge at the moment. But